I was wrong about Pan-Africanism. A few days ago, I made a video calling Pan-Africanism pan-Scamanism. It's not because I don't believe in the concept of Pan-Africanism. Obviously, I do. I believe for the unity and the liberation for all Black people across the world and for us to be able to work together. But just because I criticize Pan-Africanism for also being pan-Scamanism doesn't mean that I'm wrong. It just means that Pan-Africanism is an ideology, but what you really get on the side of the equation is scamming, or lies, or no development. And the person that had a big issue with that is fellow Black American YouTuber Afro Think Tank, who is also, by action, a Pan-Africanist. He criticized my stance by saying this.
Because O'Shea wants to blame all the problems of Africa on Pan-Africanism, which makes no sense because Pan-Africanism is an ideology of unification. So any leader, like I just posted a video showing you what real Pan-Africans and Africa is doing, because Africa's a massive ass continent, a lot going on, right? And all that tribalism that people like FBA talk about and ADOS, that's ethno-nationalism. FBA is a ethno-nationalistic movement.
He said that I blamed all of Africa's problems on Pan-Africanism, which is not necessarily true. Pan-Africanism, or the lack thereof, is because of all of Africa's problems. And I don't want to blame the white man or colonialism or white supremacy because of it. I honestly believe that a lot of the failures of Pan-Africanism is a personal choice. Now, could it be because of white supremacy or colonialism? Sure, but again, a personal choice. He also calls out certain groups who operate as if they're ethno-states. Groups such as #FBAs, #ADOSs, people who do not care about other Blacks around the world. And he holds these certain people accountable. But he continues on with his assault.
They don't care about their race. They care about their ethnicity. They're tribalist. The same FBA be talking about, that's what they do. Because FBA is a group of African Americans that don't care about Black people globally. They don't care about their race. They only care about their specific group of North American Africans that's in America. That's the only thing they care about. That's their priority.
He continues to iterate that Blacks such as #FBA or #ADOS only care about themselves, not about the other Blacks around the world. For all intents and purposes of this video, I believe that we should leave FBAs or #ADOSs out of the argument. And the reason why is, number one, they've already let us know that yes, they do believe that they should focus on themselves and not other people. And number two, they have no interest in Pan-Africanism, all right? We should leave the argument for those people who are interested in Pan-Africanism, such as myself, such as Afro Think Tank. And so what we should do for this argument, in my honest opinion, is talk about those people who actively participate in the Pan-African ideology, or at least say they participate in the Pan-African ideology. We can't hold people accountable for something that they don't want to participate in. They are just critics of the model. But what about people who are actually in the model? People who can make decisions in the model. And Pan-Africanism is just not an ideology. It's also what you can do regionally in Africa and in the diaspora. And I want to give a real good example of what happened here in the East African region with the East African visa. On December 1st, 1967, the East African community would come together. Those three countries would be Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. These countries became a treaty for East African cooperation with trade and all of the things to unite this bloc. By the time 1977 would come about, you would see this union dissolve, and we would also see Tanzania and Uganda actually engage into a brutal war. Okay, with the ousting of Idi Amin. So 23 years later, July 7, 2000, this East African community would come back together. with the founding members, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. Now, what would happen is Rwanda and Burundi joined in July 2007, and then you would get some members like South Sudan in 2016, and the DRC in 2022, and Somalia in 2024. But I want to focus on Rwanda, all right? Rwanda has been a really good member of the EAC, and something else happened in 2014. So what happened in 2014 is that we saw the East African tourist visa. Now, if you guys see on the screen, this is what it looks like. When I first came to Uganda in 2017, I got a Ugandan visa, but I have got this visa before. And this East African tourist visa was between Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda. Not Tanzania, but Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda. And if you've ever been here before, you recognize this visa, okay? It wasn't just a travel convenience, it was a Pan-African experiment in regional unity. It was a tangible step towards realizing free movement of African people within Africa. So if you came in from the United States, you would spend $100 and you could stay within this region, okay, within 90 days, just like you would in the Schengen region in Europe. If you were to go to Germany, France, I mean, you would experience that same thing. So you pay $100 and you would get all of this region, okay? It was beautiful. You can go back in between Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda. It was awesome, all right? And this showed African cooperation that actually worked. One visa, 3 countries, multiple entries, encouraging citizens and visitors to see the region as one space. All right. However, this would change. All right. We already know what happened, I believe, in 2023. Kenya would go with its own ETA. All right. So it dropped out of this situation, which was their electronic travel authorization. One of the reasons why Kenya may have dropped out is because payment fails, credit card may work on different browsers. Tourism industries complain that glitches and system failures were frequent and that there's no fallback or recourse. But for whatever reason, they could never get it right. And so now Uganda and Rwanda were left to defend this. So then this East African tourist visa went away. If we were to really see Pan-Africanism, like what Afro Think Tank is saying, we would have seen countries added to the East African tourist visa program. But we didn't. We saw the countries decrease. Now, we have seen countries join since that time. I've already talked about it. South Sudan has joined in 2016. We've seen the Congo in 2022. We've seen Somalia in 2024. So what should have happened in theory if Pan-Africanism was working is that you should have been able to pay $100 and get access to the Congo. You would have been able to get access to Somalia and to South Sudan. But that didn't happen. The reverse happened. So when we're talking about Pan-Africanism, this is a great example of why Pan-Africanism is not working for those who claim to be Pan-Africanists, all right? The people who are supposed to be practicing Pan-Africanism as an ideology, if they are not doing it, then it's not working. That's the whole idea. It's not that people are necessarily against it, but when the people who are supposed to uphold it are not doing it, that say they are Pan-African, then what do you have to say about that? Again, these are all countries who participate in Pan-Africanism by way of unification. This is what they have tried to do. Look at what we see with the East African Federation and then also with the East African visa. We had Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya all coming together to give a better experience for those of us who are foreigners, or if you didn't have a business visa, and if you're coming over as a tourist, you would get access to all 3 countries for $100. But we saw Pan-Africanism in practice fall apart before our very eyes. I had to spend more money getting a ETA. Not only did I spend more money, but Kenya actually gave a better deal. I have a 5-year ETA going into Kenya, which is better than the 90 days that I would have to spend for a visa. What Kenya did was undercut the East African visa for their own goods. They operated for themselves. They didn't care about Uganda or Rwanda. They cared about themselves, which is interesting because he makes that same claims about FBA or #ADOS. He calls those individuals the ethno-states. They don't care about blacks around the world. We just saw Kenya, a big time player in Africa, one of the aspirational countries in Africa, say we do not want to be involved with the East African visa anymore. We are looking after our own interests, and they did that exactly. But not only that, I also want to bring evidence about what's going on with the African Free Trade Agreement. My second example is the African Free Trade Agreement. Now, it was signed in 2018 and launched in 2021. This was hailed as Africa's biggest economic milestone since independence. Its goal was to do a few things. Number one, create the world's largest free trade zone by membership. Create a single African market for goods, services, and investment. The free movement of people and capital across the continent. It was supposed to increase the industrialization through intra-African value chains. And also, most people in the European Union trade with each other. So basically, Africa is trading more with Europe and China than with itself. So the African Free Trade Union was supposed to keep more money inside of Africa than it leaving the continent, okay? However, where do we see the African Free Trade Agreement right now? These countries have signed, but it's still on paper, okay? And an example of it still being on paper is the dissonance that we saw with the East African tourist visa. What's the current status? Tariff reduction schedules are slow. Most countries haven't fully implemented the agreed 90% tariff cuts. That means goods and services are still expensive. Custom systems between African countries are largely not compatible. I mean, like, how many times have we seen difficult border protocols, taxes, scams, all of that? The free movement of protocols are still stalled, all right? You still get a whole bunch of infrastructure bottlenecks, and then you still get gatekeeping, protectionism, and bureaucracy at the border, even for goods supposedly under free trade. Now, this is supposed to help Pan-Africanism in practice, but it actually contradicts Pan-Africanism because Pan-Africanism is about unity in practice, which is cultural, social, and economic. But when you don't get to see it, it's the opposite, all right? You have countries dismantling a regional visa that literally enabled the movement between people between countries. Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda, all right? This is the ideological and bureaucratic arms of Africa. It shows that it is not in sync, okay? And why is it happening? I'm gonna tell you why it's happening. Because Africa, many of the countries are afraid of sovereignty loss, okay? Many African states operate under a state first, Africa second mindset. What are they scared of? Uncontrolled migration. In actuality, let's look at this.
If you know yourself that you're not South African, please stand up. Please don't try and stand up right now. Are you South African? Because we are going to check everybody. Check them. Come. Let them go out. That's not what I want you. Man, you guys are not South African. Go out. Go. Hey, pass. Because Zimbabwe, you run past and go to the border. Hurry. South African? All these nurses and doctors, they are here for South Africans. Get up South Africa. Please stand up. Don't try us. Hey, what's that? You run past the border again.
Here's a South African hospital. You have foreigners being kicked out of public hospitals. Now, again, it's only because it's a government hospital, so somebody has told this person to do it. But isn't that different than what the African Free Trade Agreement is supposed to do? Because if the African Free Trade Agreement is supposed to come into fruition, then basically this person should be able to use the hospital like a South African. But we understand that this problem persists. We saw it with the EU and Brexit and, the UK. But also what happens is if you go ahead and become borderless, you lose revenue loss from visa fees or tariffs, okay? You also get foreign competition in local industries. And this is what Nigeria was trying to stop because some Ghanaian industries were a little bit more advanced than them, all right? So basically, Pan-Africanism requires shared control and sacrifice, all right? But if you're not getting that, then it doesn't happen, all right? People are not buying into this system in which they're preaching about. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to live it. And I can't really be criticizing anybody else who's anti-African. I can only really deal with the people who say they're Pan-African or states who follow Pan-African practices. And if these individuals do not follow what they are talking about, those who are supposed to be the strong tenets of Pan-Africanism, and we are seeing a reduction in the practice, then guess what? Pan-Africanism is not working. Not because I'm saying that it doesn't work, but because it's true. As you can see in theory, the African Free Trade Agreement is Pan-Africanism in practice. If this was to come about, it would represent the same exact thing that we see in the European Union, which means open borders, anybody could just move around, open trade, it would operate as one zone. But as we see, in order to get that accomplished, every country would have to put Africa first and itself second. But we see that that is not the case. On paper, it's supposed to be legit. In practice, it's a dud. What does this say? The people in the countries in Africa do not care about the other countries in Africa. This is the same accusation he gave towards the other groups. Hashtag FBA, hashtag ADOS. Now again, let's say he's right with hashtag FBA and hashtag ADOS. They do not claim to believe in the idea. They do not claim to want any part of the idea. Fine, they don't want to. Just like if it was somebody else who was a racist or somebody else who wasn't interested, then okay, we wouldn't expect anything from them. Who should we expect something from? The people who say that they are a part of the idea. So the people who are a part of the idea are also not delivering. They also have the same ideology as you say hashtag FBA, hashtag ADOS has, which is first us, then them. That's what Tariq Nasheed says. Well, these African countries are also behaving in this way. First us, then them, all right? So when I'm talking about Pan-Africanism in practice, this is what I'm referring to. I'm not referring to me being a segregationist against Africans. No, I'm talking about what I see on the ground every day, what I see systemically every day. I'm talking about when I go through borders to Africa, what I see every day. And I see an apathetic effort, a selfish effort, the same effort that I have been attacking on this platform. This is the issue with Pan-Africanism as a concept. I don't have a problem with the ideology. I have a problem with the lack of practice. And we cannot defend a lack of effort in order for this concept to come about. So I guess I am wrong about Pan-Africanism. I thought it could actually work. And I have just found out today that Pan-Africanism may not work in my lifetime. That's what I'm wrong about. So guys, what are you thinking? It's your boy, O'Shea Duke Jackson, back at it again with another episode of King Gonda. We're out.